Kieran, thank you so much for agreeing to join us for an episode of The Responsible Edge this morning. I know you and I connected a while ago back in the summer here in the UK.
Yes.
And it's going to be great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining.
No, thank you for having me. Exciting.
Top man. Now, Kieran, as you know, begin each show by doing a bit of a background debrief, if you like. That sounds far too formal, but doing a bit of a leap into your background and experience. Starting wherever you like, in terms of what's influenced you and inspired you to do what you do, but specifically touching on the role that ethics and responsibility and sustainability have played in your decision making. Would love to get a flavour of you and your background and share that with our audience.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll it's kind of two prongs. I'll start from sort of my interest in marketing as a whole, and then I guess hospitality, which is kind of where the sort of bulk of my career has been. So again, I was marketing obsessed from a very young age. So my favorite thing to do when I was a child was I've grown up kind of all over. So I grew up in Cyprus, lived in Northern Ireland, and then eventually moved to a very small town called Batley, which is a bit of a weird kind of transition, which is near Bradford. So, but there was a media museum in Bradford, and it was my favorite thing to do in summer, which is a weird pastime. But I just used to go and look at the adverts and look at the media, and I was just obsessed. And I remember from a young age, built TV billboards. I used to kind of drive by them and was obsessed with them changing. And how they were, I mean, this is time ago in terms of like, I remember Lambert and Butler adverts, which is pretty wild. But I was just obsessed with marketing. So so that's kind of where my interest in marketing started from a young age. Always knew I wanted to be in marketing. Throughout my school years, did everything that kind of fed into that. So at college was doing English and media because I knew both of those would kind of go in hand my eventual career. Then went on to university, and then again did marketing with them.
Kieran, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You're a full pipe, but I'm so intrigued, and I think our listeners will be too. Like, what was it? I mean, spending your summers going to the media museum is quite something. Like, what was it about marketing and media that was so attractive to you?
I can't really pinpoint. I just think I remember thinking it was just so amazing how I loved watching the different brands and how the different brands had these different adverts. So I remember in the media museum, there'd be ones for Fry's chocolate, if we remember them. So Jesus. And then there'd be like the Levi's adverts, and everything was so different, and the juxtaposition of how big. And I always remember thinking it was kind of like Hollywood-esque. And rather than watching films and TV, it was adverts for me. It was really strange. I would watch TV series and films, and then the ad breaks would come on, and I'd be excited by the ad breaks. I remember things like the Boddington's advert with Melanie Sykes. I remember just being like enthralled with it. Just the story of that was more exciting to me than the story of a film, which is just a bit crazy. I mean, I remember one of the things, for example, we had to write to someone about fox hunting. It was like an English, maybe I was in year 7.
Okay.
And everyone was writing to the Prime Minister at the time, which had been Tony Blair, I think. And I wrote to Pamela Anderson because she'd done a Peter advert for stop wearing go naked. I'd rather go naked than wear fur, I think it was.
Okay, nice.
So I wrote to her asking if she would help with the fox hunting crisis. I just had an obsession with adverts. It's a bit of a weird kind of childhood.
No, it's a brilliant childhood. I love the idea that child Kieran is sat there watching a movie with friends and family and just getting super excited when the advert break comes on. I think that's brilliant. Do you think just peering back and thinking about what really, reflecting on kind of what really attracted you to the adverts that you were seeing? Is there, obviously there's been an explosion in recent years of short form video content and the impact that that's had from a reel perspective, from a TikTok point of view, etc., Snapchat. Like, do you think you were almost like pioneering that sort of attraction, if you like, to short form video content, which obviously is what adverts inherently, TV adverts inherently are?
Sure, it's interesting you said that because I reckon, because I'm not a big fan of films. I find them so long, especially now. I feel like films, they think to get an award, it has to be about 4 hours with kind of shots of the same thing. So
quantity over quality.
Yeah. But I like short form. So I guess, yeah, I've always liked that short form. I prefer TikTok and Reels and YouTube Shorts because I feel like you're getting the message straight out. I prefer that story condensed. I feel like there's also opportunity to have multiple stories rather than just one. Which I feel like, again, with TV series is that preference because there's always something changing per episode. Same with the adverts.
I feel like, I mean, I'm put words in your mouth, but I feel like you were essentially a bit of a, you were pioneering as a child, realizing that this was the future, that this was what we needed to focus on, the short form content. I interrupted you though. You were in full flight. I think we got to English literature.
Yes.
And at what age are you, is this A level? When are you sort of beginning to specialize?
From university, yeah. So this was college. So it was about 16. I mean, when I was, at high school, I just always was obsessed with English anyway, right from the sort of young ages. Again, anything where you could write newspaper articles, write adverts, anything that was kind of inclined to that, I was drawn to. I remember in primary school, I used to love kind of the challenges where you have to create a cookie. You design the cookie, but I was more interested about designing the advert for the cookie. But anything within line with that. So from a young age, then went on to the sort of the college and then into university, then obviously did marketing kind of a specialist. I went to Northumbria originally and did a media course, and it was just too traditional in my eyes. There wasn't much anything about social media. So I ended up transferring, moving to Leeds and then doing a different marketing course that had more of a social media kind of umph to it. But then obviously from that, in terms of sort of the ethical standpoint, the reason why I really love marketing and why I've kind of transitioned to that is, although I loved those adverts and kind of TV and film and media, loved that as a child, never really saw myself in any of those adverts. I feel like it was very led to sort of the nuclear family, sort of straight white male, I guess, is kind of in its pinnacle. And I never really saw myself as kind of a young gay man. I never really saw myself in media. So I guess that kind of need to change adverts and change media and kind of represent other people that I wasn't seeing in those forms kind of was another catalyst to me really going into marketing and trying to delve into that.
And Kieran, let me ask you, like, talk us through the experience of not seeing yourself in adverts. Like, what's that like? Like, what's the impact to you? Can you recall what did it anger you? Did it sort of inspire you? Like, it clearly inspired you, but just talk us through that feeling of not being underrepresented.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of both in that. It's kind of a bittersweet feeling. I guess if I'd seen myself in media, I wouldn't have gone down that path. So I look kind of back on that fondly in a weird way. But yeah, upset and anger. I think growing up, you don't see yourself in those forms of media. You don't see yourself kind of represented, and you kind of do hate yourself a little bit, because I did live with a lot of self kind of doubt and feeling like I wasn't wrong. I was wrong and didn't kind of belong in any kind of normal scenario. And I speak to people all the time that, again, from completely different backgrounds, who have the exact same experiences growing up and don't see themselves. And now you can often see, and I mean, look at, for example, the ridiculous pushback on the Boots advert for Christmas this year, where it's kind of focused on Mrs. Claus, and people push back on that, and people think they're being erased, but everyone was erased to start off with. It's just because now diversity isn't about just showing minorities or one kind of sort of faith, religion, gender. It's about everything, and that includes a straight white male. It's just diversity, having more of something. It's just because you're not shown as much and there's more of other people, it doesn't mean your share's gone. You're still being represented in those spaces, and I think people are pushing back on that a little bit now because they're kind of scared by that. But try having that from the start when you aren't being seen as represented, and you kind of have that self-doubt or kind of worry. I mean, I didn't come out till the age of 25, I think I was 24. But again, and if I'd seen myself in adverts, if I'd seen that family of two dads potentially, and that, I would have felt a bit more kind of normal.
It's such a to sort of draw on such a personal experience of yours and the influence that the media and marketing and communications can actually have on, an individual, person's experience, I think that's so telling, that's so impactful, that actually, when we're obviously going to talk about the roles that brands play in aligning themselves with social causes today, just to give our listeners a bit of a preview of what we're going to be discussing. But it's pretty evident there of the potential impact that brands can have on individuals at a very personal level. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Kieran. That was really, really interesting, and thank you for being open with it. Let's move forward now. So you're at university. Well, you've been to university. You've done your marketing degree. Was it everything that you were doing a media degree at Northumberland and then switched over to a more sort of modern, interesting, sort of vibrant marketing degree? Where did you study that?
That was at Leeds. So in Leeds Met, it was called at the time. So transferred over to there just because it was exciting, because it was kind of new media. Social media was still kind of fresh, I guess. That transition. And again, social media, obviously, I'm lucky to be in that generation. I feel like I'm lucky to be in that generation of growing up without social media and with social media. So I know both worlds. But it was still new then. So that was exciting to me.
What I'm going to pick you up on that, because again, it's fascinating. Like, what do you think when you say you feel lucky to have grown up in a time before social media and then sort of with the emergence of it? Like, why do you feel lucky in that sense?
I think because I don't take social media for granted in that sense. I've seen how the world is in both ways. I think maybe also being able to navigate that without kind of, it does worry me how social media is literally kind of everything at the moment in terms of growing up with social media from the age of, people are being filmed as children on TikTok and Instagram. They have their whole life documented on social media. And I think that has really changed Gen Z, and Alpha, because they have. I remember, for example, and I'm sure you remember when you started university when you're 18, you go to places like Tiger or Oceana, and you'd have those horrible nights where you drink
vodka revs.
Yeah, vodka revs. You drink £1 VKs, and you'd upload an album of 60 pictures for one night on Facebook. Insane, from like the pre-drinks to the takeaway at the night, and you'd have a full album. It's such a weird world to have lived in. But we weren't
Sorry, Kieran. It was that madness of people like with their handheld camera, strapped to their wrists, out and about. Like, I just remember it. Like, people were like, "Oh, where's your camera? Have you kept your camera on you?" Oh yeah. No, sorry, you're taking me back. Sorry, carry on.
Taking the SD cards so you could delete taking the camera home so you could delete the pictures that you didn't want to put on Facebook. And then you'd spend the next morning, you'd be tagging people in 500 pictures, and it'd be like, tag. Such a weird world to live in, but it was great. It wasn't that self-editing as much as it is now with filters and AI and everything that's kind of it's a beast, and there's amazing things that are coming out of that, but also it's quite scary. So I think being of that generation, it's great because I can have that kind of bridge the gap between what is real and what isn't. And I think that's, again, it was eased in. So that sense of belonging kind of probably did come from social media a little bit, where I wasn't being represented in TV. So there was this benefits. And I think really social media is based on the foundation of fitting in or being part of something. I mean, if you look at MySpace, the top 6 friends is, again, a wild concept where you would have your top 6 friends and you would change them every week on who was your best friend and who wasn't. It was almost like rating people. You'd have MSN where you would write your friends' names in your name, and you could delete one if you'd fallen out with them. It's such a weird sense. Or Facebook groups, which everyone was obsessed with, Facebook groups of feeling like a sense of belonging. So I think social media has that, which is great, and there is a comfort for that. But I think there is a toxic side of it, and not knowing life before that is probably quite difficult to kind of avoid that. At school, for example, bullying, etc., you kind of would avoid that at 3 p.m. because you would go home. Now that is sort of a bit tumultuous in terms of people who are always online. So I do feel quite lucky to have been that generation.
yeah, it's that healthy perspective, isn't it? Or the capacity for a broader perspective, I think, that you've alluded to, which I think is so spot on. I keep interrupting you though, because you keep on making interesting points. So I want to ask you questions, but do carry on. So you're at Leeds, you've done this interesting new degree. What happens next in terms of, heading into your career?
Yeah, so then the other kind of underpinning, kind of one of the only personality traits I've got, again, is hospitality. So I was joined sort of the world of hospitality when I was 15. So alongside this marketing obsession was kind of working from the age of 15. My first job was at Bella Italia, which I don't even know if you can be 15 and working at Bella Italia anymore. But again, and to be fair, again, there's some kind of questions around the ethics of that. I mean, I was 15 pulling pints and asking people whether they wanted to sit in the smoking or non-smoking section. So probably ethics around that. But so I was in this world of hospitality, and again, kind of felt like this was something that was fun and exciting and was fast paced, and never saw myself having a career in hospitality. Obviously, I didn't see marketing and hospitality as going hand in hand. Even right up until the age of kind of 18, 19, 20, again, didn't really see the merit in hospitality, and marketing still thought it was maybe quite traditional. So then joined, was a server, and then ended up joining the Alchemist, and which is obviously a kind of large hospitality company in the UK with they've got 24 venues now, including some in Berlin. So I joined when there was 3 venues and worked my way up. And it was around the university age, and I was going to kind of leave and get a marketing job, find sort of an internship for very little money and kind of work that way. And they then said to me, why don't you do this kind of venue specific marketing and sales role? So obviously gave that a go, and that's where my career kind of flourished from there. So like I said, it was 3 venues when I joined, and then we ended up having 24 venues opening in Berlin internationally. Worked on an e-commerce platform, so we were selling prints. I worked on the book, so we did a cocktail recipe book with Penguin Publishing. Worked with the brand director on the execution of that, so the photo shoot, writing, assisting with writing the book. So these are huge marketing things that I never thought I'd be able to do that did in this long career. So that's where it kind of started. And then the Alchemist was a big chunk of my role of where we were able to I was able to look at the ethics and implement marketing strategies around that as well. And then have then moved on, was the head of marketing, still acting head of marketing for KG Hospitality. So again, is a smaller hospitality company in London. So we have Pop Brixton, which is a big street food venue in Brixton, which again comes with a lot of community initiatives, which is fantastic. And then Amazing Grace, which is a live music venue that we will be rolling out. So opening a second one in Canary Wharf next year, looking to open sort of a beer tap room concept. So worked with those on a lot of different brand ideation and marketing strategy. And then amazingly, KG Hospitality allowed me to go freelance, and kind of I'm working for KG as in a freelance capacity, but then I've also been able to pick up other clients. A lot of it is F&B, but not just hospitality in terms of restaurants. So that's exciting. So that's kind of my career without delving into all the different things that I've set up. But
well, Kieran, that was, as I know through looking, and I should say for any listeners out there, which I thoroughly recommend you do, we'll obviously link to Kieran's LinkedIn profile in all of our materials, so you can go and have a proper deep dive and hear about all the things that he's been too humble to share during his introduction of himself on today's show. But Kieran, I've got one question for you. We're blitzing through our 20 minutes on you, but when the Alchemist, the experience that you had of going from an organization that managed 3 venues to 24, and what impact did that have on your role and the role of marketing for the group? Like, how did things evolve over that time? And I might be putting words in your mouth here, but was one of the attractions about going to KG was that you kind of got to go back to some of that more formative, kind of really creative work that perhaps you were, that you really enjoyed during your time, sort of during the growth stage of the Alchemist? I'm putting words in your mouth there. Feel free to bash it around and throw it back at me.
No, you seem to always read me so well. Very on the money. Yeah, so I also 3 venues to 24 within that great scope of work of becoming a brand as opposed to venues. At the start, there was 2 in Manchester and 1 in Leeds. And then the 4th one opened in London, and from then it grew exponentially. With that, I was managing all the social channels, so ended up condensing all those social channels into one brand voice, one account, and then working on that tone of voice and who we are as a brand, and kind of how we speak and how we act and how we feel, which was amazing because in over that space of 10 years, the world changed so much. I mean, the world changed the most in COVID. Like we all kind of, the lockdown and COVID, a nightmare that we were all living in, really changed the world of hospitality. But I feel like the Alchemist, we were kind of, not to kind of blow our trumpet, I guess, but we were pioneering in the way that we were looking at campaigns and delving into the ethics and kind of looking and hearing people and what they wanted before COVID. So we were looking at those kind of things. But then COVID obviously kind of accelerated people's way of working. I think, I know I'm going off on a tangent, apologies, but hospitality is notorious for being an industry that ethics don't really go hand in hand, or haven't historically. It's kind of industry where you wear your badges you used to wear them as a badge of honor. You do 70 hours a week and you'd be bragging about that, which is crazy. And I think COVID accelerated that, where people said, I don't want to, I've got work and work and personal life balance, and I've seen what that is, and I don't want to be working 70 hours, and I don't think I need to work 70 hours a week to be proving my kind of loyalties to a brand. And I think that's so much better. So much good things came out of that, because hospitality in general, everyone was like that. I had lots of friends in different hospitality for different brands, and it was all the same. It was kind of, I've been on my feet for X amount of hours, and that's applauded. So yes, I've gone off a tangent then, but so in terms of that smaller business going to a sort of a large business, international business, that was amazing. I worked on huge campaigns, which was exciting. Was able to delve into a lot of different personal passions and where I sit and where I feel and mirror that through the brand. And then it got to the point where with 10 years, it was amazing, but I wanted that next challenge again. So to echo what you said, I wanted to do that with another brand, and I was actually approached by KG and they were like, we've got these huge expansion plans, which was amazing. And to then delve into something where, for example, Pop Brixton's a street food venue, which is something completely different to what the Alchemist was. It's got a lot of community initiatives that sit within that, which is great. And I was able to kind of delve more into that more relaxed element and try on a few different hats. So
very good, very good. And it sounds, and I know we spoke about this before, but the fact that you're now working in a freelance capacity and having all of these other influences of other clients that you're able to work on these other new campaigns and strategies with, it's almost, you can see that kind of timeline of events leading you to sort of exploring more and more different influences and enjoying that process. So it's certainly going to be interesting to follow what you do next, Kieran, with a close eye on LinkedIn. Let's now switch focus slightly onto, I think it was Wayne Elsey's, I always butcher the names when I introduce them. I'm sure if anyone ever listened in, who's written one of these articles, eyes would roll. But it was in Forbes, I think it was May 2023. Kieran, would you mind just giving our listeners just an overview of what the article covered, and then perhaps pick out whatever the most interesting or salient points were for you in that piece?
Yeah, sure. So it was a really interesting kind of article in terms of alignment with brands. So how the younger generations are now sort of more led towards brands that help with social issues that they feel passionate about. And he was kind of talking about how one of the most interesting points, to be fair, was how it was saying that companies are now kind of more trusted than obviously politics and non-profit organizations. So it's basically saying that now is the perfect time to kind of really lean into those issues and show that you're doing sort of purpose-driven marketing.
I remember picked that out in particular myself when I read the article. Do you Do you see that playing out in your experience? Do you feel like brands are increasingly trusted in the broadest sort of macro environment, or has that actually played out in your experience?
Yeah, I think so. I feel like now with social media, brands can speak to consumers very candidly and openly. I think TikTok's really helped with that. I think when I was doing strategy for social media for The Alchemist, I really had to relinquish some of my kind of control of aesthetics, of being marketing. You kind of obsessed with how things look, and I really had to relinquish that and post things that I wouldn't necessarily post on Instagram, for example. And I think that's because people of that younger generation do prefer kind of I can't think of any other word than bullshit. Apologies, but no bullshit. No bullshit approach in terms of.
This one will go out after 9 o'clock. Don't worry.
I was trying to think of a better word. Sorry. That people want to know exactly what's going on with the brand and have the ability to tell you in real time that no, that's not correct, and actually I don't agree with this, or you don't actually do that because of X, Y, and Z. So I do think there is that level of authenticity now through social channels, and I think if you are obviously using them in the best ability, obviously you have to have some legs to stand on when you're kind of jumping into anything that's kind of driven to do with awareness. I mean, I've said quite a few times that I think silence is obviously is deafening in terms of when you are silent on a subject, you've kind of given your answer to the subject. But on the flip side of that, I also feel like you need to kind of really bat down the hatches in terms of know what you're talking about and think, is there a reason for us to delve into this? And if there is, how should we delve into this? Why is this? Is there someone in the company that wants to have the voice on this situation rather than just kind of jumping on every issue? So I think the article kind of leads into a lot of really key factors around that. And I think going back to the sort of issues and really having weight behind that is one example that I have personally in terms of my experience as a gay man. We many moons ago at The Alchemist, we had a venue in Manchester that was based near Canal Street. So it was kind of every time there was Pride in August, it was on that kind of Pride route. And we would do a Pride cocktail. This is a long time ago, I think maybe 2012. And something which is obviously great, it was kind of getting involved with the community, but something didn't really sit too well with me in terms of wasn't really giving anything back. And I think now people are really hot on kind of any type of washing, and particularly in June in Pride Month, when brands kind of stamp a rainbow flag on their logo and kind of that's pretty much done, and then on the 1st of July it's swiftly changed back. I think people were really hot on that now, but back then people maybe weren't as hot on it, and that's from my own experiences. And I kind of spoke to Jenny, our brand director, and said, this is how I'm feeling, and I think it'd be great if we had some sort of charity initiative. And then from that conversation, from us both speaking, we input that charity on the special cocktail in all the cities that Pride was in. And then it then snowballed into, we had that every day, all year round. We had that cocktail on. 50p went to the Albert Kennedy Trust. And I think when I left, I think it was around 80k we'd raised for the Albert Kennedy Trust. And I think that's incredible, and being able to be part of that conversation. Then there was conversations of potentially in the future changing this to kind of a trans-based charity, just because of all the problems that trans people are experiencing at the moment with the political kind of narrative around everything. I mean, it's pretty despicable, and it's obviously only going to get worse, I predict, with America. So leaning into that, I think there was a space for me to be able to have a conversation on that, because I'm from that community.
Kieran, that was brilliantly introduced. As you were describing that, I mean, first of all, I think, and I think the article alludes to this, the term cause washing, I think, is a brilliant term to sort of capture how you can get this wrong, and what the ultimate outcome is if you as a brand try to inauthentically align yourself with a cause that just doesn't fit. But what you described there in terms of that initiative, for me, the authenticity comes from the consistency of the commitment. And that's what you achieved there, because as you say, it became, we're not just going to do this for the month. We're not just going to do this as a sort of a promotional promotional activity. We're going to do this consistently, and we're going to do it to achieve an outcome which actually has a direct social impact, i.e. raising money for this particular cause, and a significant amount of money that can actually have impact. So is that what when you think about an authentic alignment between a brand and a social cause, is it that consistency that's absolutely vital in your mind?
For sure, consistency, and like I said, kind of backing up what you're speaking about, speaking to people in the venues and in your company, and what social causes are you behind, like what's your experience, and getting to know people. And I think then there's authenticity, kind of there's a story around that, you can kind of back that up. I think with that, for example, it's great to do those initiatives for every month. Consistency doesn't have to be that whole year. You can do something for that month. For example, in International Women's Day, we did things for that full month where we did spotlight on specific women in the business, and we did a cocktail where money went to a specific women's-based charity. But that was for a month. That's fine as long as there's consistency with your messaging. And I mean, again, in terms of that consistency and kind of harkening back to what I said about diversity, and diversity being everybody. When we did that International Women's Day campaign, as always, you get naysayers and X, Y, and Z in social media. There's people saying, what about men? What about men? Which is like, yeah, of course. And we then answered that with, we've got something for men in June. So in June, we did for Men's Awareness Month, we did about mental health. And I spoke candidly about kind of issues that I'd had with depression and anxiety. And we did a blog piece on and spoke to other men in the team, and kind of delved into areas of I mean, I think it's 1 in 4 men, it was saying recently, don't have close friends. So so there's that kind of margin of people that aren't represented, and there's the ability to do a campaign there for that month where maybe you encourage men to come into bars and speak over a drink about their problems. There's different things you can delve into. It doesn't have to kind of be linear to that kind of specific minority. As long as you're consistent with how that works for the brand and there's relevance, then that makes sense. And I think with the consistency element, that yes, like I've said, there's still that important piece of seeing, are we just doing this for the sake of it? Obviously, don't just do something for the sake of it. There has to be that authenticity with that as well.
Kieran, can I ask you, that was again a brilliant response. I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and this is, and feel free to bat this bat if you think that this is absolute nonsense. But we're marketing and comms guys ourselves, and often speak to organizations, signatories of the charter, etc., that we work with about this sort of stuff. We're obviously bombarded daily with, there are crazy stats, aren't there, on the number of advertising messages that we're subjected to on average. I'm not going to get it right, but I think it's like tens of thousands potentially, or thousands of messages a day. Is there a suggestion to be made? I'm thinking of like the Patagonias of this world. I think the article you mentioned, Dove, etc., where we don't have, as individuals, as consumers, as stakeholders, we don't have the bandwidth in order to be able to adjust our frame of reference when we look and consider a brand from one alignment of social cause to another. And that actually the best thing to do when it comes to engaging with stakeholders is to create a really clear picture in the consumer's mind of the social cause, perhaps, or, social causes minimal number that this brand is associated with, because that kind of real clarity in terms of, I know that when I think Patagonia, I think environmental sustainability. I don't think environmental sustainability, mine's gone blank, but social cause X, social cause Y, social cause Z. I've got this really clear alignment in my mind, which is simple, clean, clear, and allows me to refer and to evangelize for the brand quite clearly. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sure they do other things to represent other social causes, etc., as well, but that because they've been so consistent on that message, I align my thinking of that brand with that cause. just touch. I've absolutely sort of gone off on a just a ramble there, but comment on that for me. Like, do you think there's power in being more focused when it comes to the social causes that a brand aligns themselves with?
I think there is power, for example, with Patagonia, of sustainability. That message is clear. And like you said, you instantly think that. With Dove, which is mentioned in the article, it is that kind of real body. I mean, in fact, going back to when I was a child, one of the billboards I remember thinking was insane and I was obsessed with was the Dove one when they launched the real view, and it was all the women in different kind of shapes and sizes, which was amazing. I remember thinking, God, that's amazing. I've never seen that. So yeah, there's obviously those kind of key brand alignments, which is great. But I don't think you should then have that silence specifically on every other kind of need and issue. I think it's about tying that into. So, for example, with Patagonia and sustainability, that's at their core. They could do something in terms of sustainability with Pride Month, for example, that is kind of affects both brands, whether it's working with a sustainable LGBT-owned business or Black History Month working with kind of a Black-owned business that do sustainable collaboration on that. I think there's always a way to kind of lean that and not lose your kind of core messaging. I think it is great to have a core message, but not, like you said, our consumption of kind of media. If everyone had a core message from the offset, it would just be like, whoa, I need to buy about 50 different brands to be able to kind of give back and feel like I'm doing something in the earth and kind of prioritize what I deem as kind of valuable. So yeah, I think that there's an ability to have both. I think it's an interesting topic.
Kieran, do you think that are there any brands, sectors, industries, etc., that you think purpose-driven marketing or purpose marketing isn't relevant for?
Well, yeah, obviously, there'll be some brands that I would feel a bit like, oh, and that's again with jumping on that kind of jumping on a bandwagon. I wouldn't really deem BP as kind of a specific company that I would think giving back, but then I'm sure that there will be initiatives that they will feed into to kind of offset that, whether that's putting people in education or X, Y, and Z. So, but I think it's about seeing what is relevant for you. And that's where I think silence, yeah, it is deafening and it is a bit of a minefield, but that's why you have to have an element of, should we be part of this conversation? And if we are part of this conversation, why? And if we're not part of this conversation, why haven't we, in case people are asking that internally and externally? So I think it's two ways. I think it can seem hypocritical. I mean, I've seen brands that go on about how they're really sustainable, and that's great. And it's great that a lot of brands, particularly in hospitality, which I do think hospitality kind of is always at the end of the kind of movement sometimes, and then jump on it kind of afterwards. But they're getting so much better at that. And I think there's times where they're saying we're carbon zero, or we're going to carbon neutral, we're more sustainable. People are winning awards for sustainability, which is great. But then you're also wanting to do campaigns around AI. And I think ChatGPT, like, I think if you ask them 5 questions, it's 200 milliliters, 2 liters of water, I think, per 5 questions. And then, so it's like, you really need to kind of look at what is the priority for you and what you align your brand is. If it's you're aligning yourself with sustainability, then you probably shouldn't be aligning yourself with kind of these movements of AI or another initiative that's kind of contradictory to that.
It's fascinating with that. We one of the sort of new sections that we require all of the signatories of the charter to complete within their green claims policy, and actually it's a section that they have to include right at the start of their policy, is literally the where we can improve section. And they are required to detail where they as an organization are not sustainable, and then ultimately provide details about what they're doing to address those issues, if you like, that are at play within the organization. And the reason we've done that with our signatories and made that the priority first section is that what it does is it ultimately is a disarming method. It's a way of disarming and essentially liberating the organization to go, well, look, we know that we're not fully sustainable. No organization is. We've acknowledged where we're not. We've acknowledged what we're going to try and do to address those issues. But what we do think is important is, in the meantime, that we're able to share the things that we are doing really well. And I think that for me is how I know that's applied to green credentials and environmental credentials, but you could almost apply that, I think, that kind of proactive disclosure to really any other type of cause or purpose driven marketing. Give yourself freedom through proactive disclosure. Just touch on that, Kieran, in terms of your experience of adopting that approach with some of the brands you've worked with.
Yeah, for sure, because it's, again, you have to be authentic. People now can delve into, I mean, this is great, but also scary at the same time. There'll be things where people have posted on TikTok and they've done something offensive. Within minutes, people have found their LinkedIn, where they work, their address. It's scary, but people get called out. It's this person has been posting these things. That's how quick it is for people to research companies now and research what you're doing and whether you are authentic. So you have to kind of put your money where your mouth is. And I think that's really important in terms of being authentic, and also the customer loyalty and that purpose-driven marketing is, again, touching upon that realm of you're connecting with people. So people are invested in you and you're investing in them. So the minute that they feel like they're lied to, they switch off and they won't ever listen to anything else. So that's what I'm saying in terms of you need to be really concrete on what you are. And I think that would help, and being crystal clear on, for example, International Women's Day. I think it was last year, Burger King did a post around women belong in the kitchen, I think it was.
Wow.
And it was, as an overarching campaign, it was quite cool if they explained it and said, oh, we're championing women and we're hiring more women, and we've got kind of an academy that we're launching where we want more female cooks, etc. Line chefs, head chefs, we want women on the development team, etc. That's great. But you've just done this overarching sweeping thing to get into an International Women's Day, talking about women in the business. If you're going to do that, then okay, let's show your kind of equality, like show the pay. So how equal is the pay in your head office? How many female chefs do you have? So I think there has to be that level of kind of owning it,
and being prepared for the scrutiny that will come, and making sure that there are no stones. In fact, let me ask you that, Kieran. I've got two questions for you. We're rattling through towards the end of the show now, but in an instance where in really good faith, an organization has chosen to align itself with a particular cause and implemented purpose-driven marketing, but for whatever reason, due diligence wasn't shown, and there's a gremlin, if you like, in the system, and ultimately, through what you've just described, it gets highlighted that there's perhaps a bit of hypocrisy at play, or essentially a bit of disingenuousness with the alignment. What does an organization do at that point? Like, how do they sort of mitigate the risks that are at play at that stage?
Again, there has to be a level of crisis management. And I think hospitality businesses still, I feel like, are really behind in marketing. A lot of these big companies that will have 30, 40 venues still have a team of 5 in the marketing, which is insane. And I think there has to be more importance on marketing. It's still seen as a fluffy role. It's still seen as, well, you can't quantify how much money is coming into the business. And actually, it's at the core of everything. And with that marketing team, you can preempt these things that will basically ruin your business, because people will find that out. They'll be inauthentic. And I think crisis management is important. And actually, hospitality businesses will have people from marketing backgrounds. The salaries are never massive, I wouldn't say, as a whole on average. And you actually should be looking for experts in that field, people that have had a bit of crisis management within that. I ended up getting a tutor, just reached out to a few people and was looking for a mentor, tutor. Mentor, I've said I'm looking out for a mentor and for sort of cross promotional professional benefit, and managed to find an amazing guy who was kind of the head of crisis for Adidas in his long kind of ream of work. And that was great, because I really managed to learn a lot that I'd never been taught about how to manage a crisis. And with a brand that I worked for, we had that in terms of a menu item was maybe deemed as cultural appropriation, and we were called out on social and had to do a big educational piece and kind of admit that there is an educational piece at hand, and there should be more involvement on the kind of development side of people that are from that culture. And that was a big learning opportunity, because you have to be ready and listen. I think people value a brand that much more, that are willing to say, wow, we really overset the mark and this is what we're going to do to be better, and own it, than people that kind of gloss over. There's hospitality brands that I'm obviously not going to name that have had drama and kind of scandals around the kind of lockdown from the team and that's become a really big thing. And they've had documentaries and stuff, and they haven't handled that as well as they could. And in that instance of just saying, whoa, this is not okay, and we're going to do something about it, and this is exactly what we're going to do. Yeah.
It's the disarming nature in that instance of being, being proactive in your acknowledgement again of where you can improve. And I think that there's people often miss with crisis management just the capacity to utilize the fact that you're human, and that people make mistakes and and errors are made, and people can be sympathetic and understanding to that, I think, far more than we perhaps allow ourselves to consider. Kieran, I'm going to ask you one more question before we get to Magic Wand. I think the article alludes to not just the impact that getting purpose-driven or cause marketing right from an external stakeholder perspective, and obviously engaging potential new customers or external investors, etc. But it also touches on the role and impact that getting it right plays on employees and internal stakeholders, and the capacity for recruitment and retention. Just touch on that. I mean, you alluded to like a personal experience of yours back in Manchester, which obviously made you, I think the way it sounds to me, the way the organization reacted to your experience, it made you feel like you were heard and your experience was taken into account. Just touch upon perhaps like in the broader aspects of your career, how that's played out and the influence that the purpose-driven marketing has had on internal stakeholders.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it goes back to what I was saying in terms of my personal experience and listening to people and hearing what they kind of want from a business. And I think a few things that we kind of implemented in terms of recruitment wise and retention wise was at the Alchemist, we did a currency of kindness. So we had an initiative where you could be paid to work one day out in a homeless shelter, helping there, or a charity initiative, or litter picking, something that would give back and give someone a sense of belonging. And that's what people wanted and resonated with. There's also an element of listening to people, and people would say about specific charities that were close to them that they really wanted to kind of get behind. So we implemented a Christmas pound donation. So in December, each venue would have a specific charity, and £1 on the bill that was optional would then go towards that charity. So, and that gives people a sense of belonging and a sense of giving back to their community. And I think there's been elements of a friend of mine and colleague was going through some sort of really hard times with family members and dementia, and that charity initiative, a lot of those were kind of implemented, and it feels like you are heard, even on a small site level, right up until head office. And I think it's really important to listen to people and speak to people internally, because they're the people that are outwardly facing, they're speaking to people, for example, from hospitality. People that are in the venues every single day are the people speaking to people, are the people that know what's important to everyone, what people are feeding back, what kind of initiatives they're responsible for. And that's why I really don't like going back to the apology kind of piece. I really hate cancel culture, because I feel like cancel culture is kind of a don't listen, we're cutting that off. And I think actually there's more value in listening and educating and speaking to each other and kind of being as one and saying, I didn't see it from that point of view, and thank you for educating me on that, and let's see what we can do to change that. And I think that helps internally, and speaking to people internally from all different backgrounds.
Beautifully positioned, Kieran. I hear. I couldn't agree with that more. It kind of lends itself nicely. You've almost given us a magic wand there before the magic wand. But let me finish off. It's been a brilliant conversation. Let me finish off with the magic wand question. Kieran, if we were to hand you a magic wand, you could change one thing about the corporate world this instant, what would that one thing be?
Yeah, again, so very nice transition. Because I just, again, eliminate sort of the systemic biases and barriers in not only hiring, but promotions and kind of those leadership roles. And I think that's where we are, again, diversity is about everyone, but I feel like predominantly is kind of that straight white male kind of led boards or led kind of head office teams, and actually putting a foundation of equal opportunity and making sure that there's more diversity and people being heard. And I think for people from all different kind of walks of life, and including class, I feel like sometimes, a lot of times, class gets kind of forgotten about in the diversity kind of conversation. And I think providing that equal access to opportunities, and whether that being funding for specific training, or whether that's being actually actively, like we said before, highlighting your pay. Do you pay fair? How much percentage of your head office are sort of people of color, are of different genders or different kind of orientations? So again, prioritizing that sort of pay equity and those opportunities, I think, would be
here, Kieran. Sorry, I was cut you off. I think another very good suggestion. I think equally, I think it's understanding. We've had a few conversations on DEI and talking about, like, it's one thing thinking about this as the sort of the stick, if you like, of, you need to do this, and it's, but actually to think about the carrot of, like, the impact of diverse views and perspectives, and like how that can transform your board environment, or it can transform your senior leadership team, or, if you can bring somebody in that isn't, tarnished perhaps by a particular perspective that's sort of beholden to their particular identity, then that becomes an incredibly powerful mix that you can create of different perspectives. So that's the pitch, if you like, for me, in terms of the carrot, to say, look, on the other side of this is fresh problem solving and creative thinking that can aid your business massively moving forward. So but Kieran, thank you so much. That has been an absolute joy to have you on the show today. I hope you feel the same way. I really appreciate you coming on.
It's been great. Thank you for having me.